Alright, if you've read the title of this video, you know why you're here. So let's get this started really fast. Geometry Dash Update 2.2 came out more than a year and a half ago by the making of this video, and it is by far the buggiest update in the game's history, as I will now proceed to demonstrate by mentioning an insane number of bugs. So, let's get started. If the camera soon continues to move the camera away during the end of the level, the final wall will be in the wrong position entirely. The statistics of the game's achievements in some instances display the wrong information. For example here, where the user reached 5,900 moons, and a 10,000 moon achievement displayed 58%. When reaching 6,000 moons, it correctly displayed 60%, completely skipping 59%. The death effect of an icon has a strange ability to stay on the screen even after multiple deaths. If you get to the end of Tower 1, the I see you can be visible instantly by pausing and unpausing, albeit for only a frame. The number in brackets next to the SED layer is supposed to indicate tile SED. The objects with this number of a higher value will be forced behind everything with a lower number within the SED layer, ignoring the SED order. That doesn't work for particles though. They're on layer 4 but are forced above objects that are layer 3. If you have more than one teleport portal placed on the X position, the BPM lags behind, and this gets progressively worse with more portals that you're adding. If you time it just right, if you reset your attempt while entering a mirror portal transition, the mirror effect glitches. The actual cause of this is unknown, but sometimes the game fails to load a sound in menus properly when performing certain actions, such as completing quests like in this case. If you then go into a level and hit play, the sound that was meant to play in a previous action may suddenly show up. If triggers have been toggled off when passing them in a level, then teleporting back behind those triggers and enable them again. The game will not care about their existence at all. Because of all the new editor features, the level length estimate in the editor may be inaccurate for 2.2 levels. As a result, an XL level could very well be just around a minute long. If you rotate the camera by 90 degrees for example, and then place a second trigger which also rotates the camera by 90 degrees, but enable the add option and set the move time to 0 on it, the camera will not rotate by another 90 degrees, instead it will stay in place. If there are objects locked to the player's X and Y position with a move trigger, in certain scenarios the game fails keeping the object in place. If you hold a dash orb with a cube when colliding with teleport pads, the dash orb effect slightly glitches visually. No effects flag doesn't work for portals affecting second player in a duel, even in non-2-player mode levels. Same with dual portals, where no effects flag also doesn't work for dual portals. If you place down 2 enter fade triggers with the same channel and effect ID set, the game will crash once you collide with the second trigger. Going to creators as levels from an unlisted one sometimes shows that they have no levels, and very rarely the account name isn't shown, instead showing the creator's name as a dash. For unknown reasons, there's a small chance that the interface for the quest completed gets stuck on the screen for way longer than it is supposed to. This can occur if you have 2 or more monitors connected to your computer. If your main monitor is not connected to the first port of your computer and then you start up the game will reset the monitor's refresh rate back to 60 Hz, unless the monitor's refresh rate is equal to the refresh rate of the monitor that is connected to the first slot of the computer. This makes it impossible to play Geometry Dash on a higher refresh rate unless you swap the cable so your main monitor is in the first slot of your computer. If someone has left a comment on a friends only level and they have their comment history set to public, you can go to the level by clicking the ID listed above the comment. If you attempt to upload a list unlisted, it will not work and will be seen publicly anyway. If you have a comment on a level that is now deleted, it is impossible to delete that said comment. It will be stuck on your profile forever. The actual diamond count of a player's account is not correctly displayed. You can enter wave or swing portals in the editor in classic mode, then switch to platformer while playtesting. This allows you to play wave and swing in the editor in platformer mode. While apparently this bug has been patched on Android, the bug where the wait time for chests and quests sometimes bug to 12 days still exists from 2.1. It is yet to be patched properly. If you use the default pre-2.1 minicube setting, you just become a cube when you enter a swing copter portal as a minicube. It is also possible for this to occur on the main menu. If you play a level by a user whose player ID matches a different user's registered account ID and then view the other users' lists, the game will incorrectly display the name of the first user and refer to lists as levels. The level presented here is oddly enough stuck on 0 downloads and likes. The sound effect with ID 12344 will never succeed to download and will always give you this error message. A simple visual bug here, when in the practice mode with the show hitboxes turned on, when going through a reverse portal causes the hitboxes to not render. The cube keeps going down the slope instead of following the normal dash or path. The bug can be reproduced by placing a downward slope and using a dash roll while being on the slope, preferably using a cube. The 25, 50, and 100 key chests don't scroll to the end, presumably because RopeTop didn't need to implement a feature for only 1 or 2 pages. But having the arrow keys be there at all for the 50 and 100 key chests is completely pointless, as they do nothing. The amount of comments in a user's page is always displayed as 999, no matter what. This might be because of it being a placeholder. Ever since RopeTop moved servers in 2023, it is no longer possible to search for numbered accounts by putting a space after their name. If you're holding a dash orb and during its path it collides with a speed trigger, the dash animation for a robot changes to the default running one, despite still being in the active dash orb state. If the level's gravity had been set to any number aside from the default for both players, any duel the player enters afterwards would only have the main icon's new gravity setting, but the second one at the default. If you place a color trigger and you have duration line setting turned on, you can make the line appear diagonal instead of straight. This is easily done by placing any trigger with a duration time, moving it up one grid and then pressing the undo button. When in the saved levels tab, go into a folder without any levels in it. After that, go into another folder and play a level. This bug does not work with any level for some reason, but it does work with Bloodbath and Duelo Maestro. After entering the level, just leave and go back to the level select screen. The text that normally only shows when there are no levels in a folder will appear. This persists switching through folders, although it goes away seemingly randomly at some point. This bug makes you unable to complete gauntlet levels in their gauntlet state, which means you can never make progress in them. Some levels fail to download as well. Apparently this happens when the level's gauntlet ID gets removed from your save file, but we have no idea how this can happen, as this is an incredibly rare bug to experience. By setting up spawn and teleport triggers in the following manner, you can clip through the ground if it goes fast enough. By jumping underneath a slope in this specific way, the icon will elevate much higher than usual, leading to some inconsistencies. If you enable advanced options, uncompleted, and coins, it will not showcase the correct information, as at times it showcases levels without coins anyway. Same goes for recent levels. If you press the play button in the editor, then immediately pause it again, there's a chance that the music in the level will continue playing on its own anyway. If you time it just right, and if the level is built with the right circumstances, there's a good chance you can clip through the structure without dying. If a user has posted a list to the game and that user changes their account name, the list uploaded prior will still display the old name. Whenever you try to rotate an object by 45 degrees that isn't within one grid block range, it will move the object weirdly. If you have selected a few objects with different size and try to scale them all with scale option, it will show them all as one-time scale the next time you click on the scale option. Watching a shockwave in the editor causes the ground to mess up. Setting the color of an invincible object to black blending or 0 with an alpha trigger, the inside glow can still be seen. The new 2.2 objects always have a higher priority in layering versus older objects. Can you notice anything wrong in this screenshot? Because it took me like half a minute to notice that the ship icon is being displayed as a cube icon instead. No clue how this was caused. The progress bar when creating a level only updates when you beat the level. An example would be that if you had a 15-second level, beat it, then made it 20 seconds, 100% would still be at 15 seconds until you beat the level again. Also, when using a start position, it starts you at 0, so this means you can end a level both before and after 100%. Mirror mode literally doesn't work when you enable it in the start position settings. If you have warped any object using the warp tool and tried rotating it, it will reset the object's warps that was done previously. For unknown reasons, the data of a daily level may be lost and switched to a not available rated level with 0 downloads and likes, as well as no creator since it doesn't exist. Stereo Madness as a placeholder song, as well as the same percentage, star count and mana orbs you had on that level. While this feature has been patched on PC, trying to use the copy level ID button on mobile still doesn't work. If you die on the exact same step that a song trigger is triggered, if the song is faded in, the same song as the base song and on channel 0, and the bass song is also faded in, the game's sound effect engine Fmod crashes, and alas, so does the game. Caused by unknown circumstances, breakable blocks creates different behavior in separate attempts. An example shown here is by playing the level Dark Slide by Gluotti, where the second passage of breakable blocks stops working once the player has hard reset the level. By arranging arrow triggers in the following setup, you will completely break the game's movement and the player can either die from going all the way backwards or jump ahead to beat the level at any time. There are multiple versions of this bug with varying levels of steps on how to make it happen. A bit difficult to understand what happens in this one, but according to this user, a static camera was used for an earlier section, then later removed using a static exit later. But when entering a game mode portal a while later, presumably with camera bounties, caused the static camera from earlier to reactivate. Selecting multiple slopes at once and trying to free move them is impossible. If you die in practice mode after a time warp trigger, the game forgets to keep it going and reset the game speed back to the default. On iOS 18, clicking on users' socials on their GD profile doesn't work. When opening a list, if you copy a level in that list, play the level and then exit out of that said level, if you exit out of the created level menu at that point, the interface for the list will have begun to disappear. If you then open a level in that menu and exit out, the entire list is just blank. After setting up a keyframe animation using the following setup, there's a decent chance that the game crashes and displays a runtime error when the player passes the keyframe trigger. The error states that the vector is too long for the code to maintain. In platformer mode, standing on a block that are also set to ice block, then jumping/flying off of said block will not reset its ice property, and as a result, even if the player is not touching said block, they will have said block's physics as if they were standing on it. This effect is the most obvious in the Jetpack and UFO game modes, but other game modes are affected too. Extra Sticky does not produce similar results. For unknown reasons, the game sometimes fails to save to the servers despite the save file size being within limits. While that can be argued to be the cause of faulty server connection, the fact that the game can duplicate levels from the editor tab as a result is definitely a weird problem. Every time when holding down any of the movement buttons on mobile before respawning into a platformer level, you will be forced in that direction even if you let go of the button you used to start the bug. You have to repress a movement button for the bug to stop. Place a platformer block and a move trigger so the block follows player X. Place your character on top of the block while it's not moving on the X axis, and when it's fully on the block, start pressing right direction. The block follows the player, but since the player is on the block, it accelerates you, which makes the block go faster and so on. When setting a start position to any other values that aren't default, then copy and pasting that same start position somewhere else, none of the options save over and are instead reset to the default one. Typing in numbers and adding spaces either between, before, or after numbers in the search bar will always direct you to the level with an ID that you typed. For example, if you type 211 in the search bar, instead of finding the Extreme Demon 211 by Circulister, it finds F by Dash. If you type 696969 or space 696969 or any other type of variation, you will always find the level EMF course by player. This is because it contains only numbers, so it automatically yields a level ID. It does not account for spaces unless you included a non-numerical character like a letter. When you place a J Clever block, it doesn't work, neither in legacy levels nor platformer mode. When searching for easy rated levels, newly rated auto levels will sometimes show up in the results anyway. Trails tab keeps number of pages from latest open tab. When looking at a comment, the player icon in the corner is unable to use a black outline. Any object's rotation is fucked up when pausing your playtesting in the editor. Some icons in the game, depending on certain circumstances in a level, will have parts of their sprite be positioned incorrectly. If you open someone's account from a platformer level's leaderboard while in the level, then play one of their levels and exit. When you exit out that person's account, the game crashes. When hitting the following orb setup and beating the level, after hitting the end wall and restarting, the same orb setup will now work in a completely different way. Similar to Bug 64, although with a slightly different setup, in the editor, if you use an arrow trigger to flip the player sideways, facing the ground, then use a dash orb, the player will get stuck to the ground and will be able to quote-unquote climb it by jumping. When searching for a collection of levels, if one inserts any number above 1000 on the Go to Page option, they will get redirected to page 1000. When upside down, the robot's trail is not affected by gravity and will instead display as normal. Setting up a regular click counter and using the A/D or left-right arrow keys will still cause the touch trigger to be registered. In the editor, playtesting with UI objects and pausing the playtest will not cause the objects to stop following the camera and go back to their normal position, but they will keep following the camera. This can be stopped by panning the camera so the object doesn't render or open, and close the edit group window for that object. If you have auto retry disabled and you die in any platformer level, the UI presents a progress bar that shouldn't be there to begin with, since the progress of platformer levels are not constant. If you click on the Select All button in the Save Levels tab with the creator's name behind it, you will press the creator's name instead of the Select All button. This happens as a result of input priority, where the creator has priority over the Select All button. When in 2x, 3x, or 4x speed, the mini-wave can partially phase through slopes if it's on a D block. I think the D blocks are somehow affecting the slopes and making them not function properly. This does not happen with Big Wave. If an object is affected by an area move trigger, whatever object follows it will not mimic that movement setup in video. Bunch of balls rotating around each other, also affected by area move, so they repel each other. Saws are set to follow the last ball, yet they only follow rotation and not area move. By pressing the arrow keys in the main level select screen near the tower, you can enter the tower accidentally while scrolling through the levels. It also happens when you enter and exit quickly from the tower back to the main level select screen. Pressing the snap rotate button repeatedly lets an object rotate correctly at first, but gets progressively worse the more you press. In the fifth last page in the first build tab, if you select any of the 1 or 0.5 times spike related items, then the ground line disappears. Whenever static camera is set to follow the object it focuses on, it resets after you go through a game mode portal after you already exited static. In modes such as platformer mode, if you hit the side of a block normally, you just bounce into it. However, clipping into the corner of a block at high enough speeds glitches you out and causes you to be teleported into the box. When going to a list, downloading a level and then exiting without removing the level off your local download, the Get It button doesn't disappear until you exit the list and then go back in. Same happens when trying to remove a level from your local download. In the editor, if you have a song trigger before the level start line and have a spike/block that instantly kills you when you hit play, the song will continue to play while you're in the editor. If you try to enter a song ID, press exit and then uncheck the song option before it closes, the interface for advanced options will be stuck. Pressing the edit special button while not having anything selected allows you to enable multi-activate on absolutely nothing. If an object with Hitbox with passable checkbox enabled interacts with the player using advanced follow trigger, player is affected by said object. This also happens if object is toggled off with toggle trigger. Event number 64 is not listed in the correct spot, but is instead listed after the 75th event. When messing around with game mode portals and their new easing and free mode checkboxes, if the player ticks the free mode checkbox then camera settings, and de-tick only the free mode checkbox, the easing parameters will not disappear from the settings window. There are multiple examples of object interfaces that are outside of their selection square, just sitting in random spots on the screen overlaying other sprites. When enabling no effects in a dual portal, it should not showcase a screen effect for when the cube enters this portal, yet it does anyway. When placing an arrow trigger right before the start of the level and with dual mode enabled, the first icon will have disappeared and the game thinks you're in dual mode, but only with a second icon. The auto build feature in current time doesn't support slopes, meaning that the last two objects in the first build tab are completely useless. If you try to use them for their intended purpose, they will switch to blocks like the racist pricks that they are. If the song offset is longer than the song itself, the game plays the song as normal, but completely forgets to keep track of where the player is and plays it without interruption. If you put a time warp trigger, place a start position after that trigger and then die, the game will still keep track of how long into the song you were, and on your next attempt, you will continue hearing the song from where you died. On Android, when trying to log into your GD account, if you have a password longer than 19 characters, it is impossible to log in unless you change your password. This is a bug because on other platforms such as iOS and Windows, the character limit is sitting at 20, whereas Android essentially makes it impossible to do certain things that the other platforms can do just fine. In the editor, if you click to start the music slider and A, it starts in between two teleport objects, and B, you use a rotate gameplay trigger after this teleport, the music slider will, instead of jumping forward, reflect backwards. By spamming an insane amount of sound effects in a very rapid fashion, it can cause a memory overload and crash the game completely. When you play a level from a start position, if you enter practice mode before the beginning of the first attempt, you will hear the levels as music instead of the default music. When going through folders and turning the favorite filter on and off, then playing another level in another folder and exiting, the text "levels marked as favorites show up here" will overlap with the other UI. By creating a platformer mode level with 2-player duel mode, place a line platform on top of the first player with a move trigger, use a blue gravity portal to keep both players in the same gravity, set up a checkpoint and a spike in the following manner, and upon respawn, the second player icon will now refuse to set on top of the line object until the first player moves again. This is mostly patched, but there are accounts that display moons on the account page, but when checking their profile, they suddenly have none. This is a result of how RubTop implemented moons, and the number seen here is instead the number of stars they collected in a week, disguised as moons. When trying to download the song and sound effect files of a level that has both of them present, the file size will always display 0.0 kilobytes, which is always incorrect. When switching between multiple ground backgrounds, the entire screen flashes black for a brief moment. When putting a pixel object in a lower Z layer than a non-pixelated object, Z ordering doesn't work, no matter the Z layer of the pixelated object. Pixelated objects seem to be drawn always after non-pixelated objects. Having an on-death trigger spawn and end trigger lets you beat the level when you die, but you still have control over the character while the level is completing. This can be used to create an infinite chain of level complete screens. You can rate the difficulty of an unrated level twice. If you leave the level page after rating it once and going back in, you can see how this is not supposed to happen. The GP offset trigger demonstrates a duration line, but when you edit the trigger, there's no slider for it. The offset settings doesn't change it at all. That line does seemingly nothing and is pointless. Any object with a circular hitbox will not scale according to the sprite if done with the warp tool. It will stay as an even circle no matter what, which can lead to some really nasty hitbox manipulation. While in the editor, if you have attempted to zoom out the camera at some point earlier in the level, even if you place the start position 30 seconds afterwards, the game will treat that previous camera zoom as if it just happened. When entering select pre-mode in the interface advanced follow trigger, 2 buttons overlap each other. If you place an object with a scale of less than 0.50 approximately in the middle of the grid in platformer mode, the player will pass through this object. Not entirely sure if this is a bug here, but in 2.2, when you unlock the next level in the gauntlet path, the name and stars doesn't immediately reveal. It did do this in update 2.1, hence the confusion on whether this is intended or not. When looking at the page that counts all of your classic level completions, the full count doesn't include the autos. Sometimes when getting out of the game on a phone with iOS, if you are in the menu when you get back in the game, the menu music may disappear entirely. Even though it was technically a bug, RubTop made the choice to keep the robot strafe fly glitch as a gimmick by allowing legacy settings that kept it for your levels. But despite legacy compatibility supposedly keeping this old bug in, it no longer works in 2.2. It does work for blocks, but not for slopes, hence the bug mentioned. The particles that come up when the player touches a platform spawn when using a spider orb / pad and do not disappear until touching the ground again. These particles spawn where the player last touched the ground. For certain triggers like the shader triggers, the game helps you out by fading out the interface to see the outcome of what changes the sliders do. But the sound effect trigger also has this feature, yet it shows nothing new until you close the interface anyway, rendering this feature completely useless for the sound effect trigger. Same thing occurs with the edit sound effect trigger. If you time your jump correctly, you can get a ridiculously high jump with the robot if you're on an exterior corner when the camera rotates. Like a 90 degrees camera rotation that leaves you on the exterior side of the ground, if that makes sense. The final ship, called Ship 169, has a small chance to appear as the default cube instead of its actual sprite. If you select this ship and attempt to play a level with it, the game immediately crashes. By holding the mouse button in the editor and pressing the escape key, if your mouse is still holding, you can still move around in the editor while the pause menu is open. If you change the search page to search for lists as opposed to levels, the magic scent and trending buttons will have no purpose at all, since they all direct to the same page anyway, with that being the most liked page. By placing an end trigger right at the end of the level, and the level's camera is zoomed out at just the right distance, you can trigger both the end trigger and the normal end wall animation at the same time, resulting in the level complete screen triggering twice. Multi-activate arrow triggers next to each other can cause inconsistent and weird behavior with the player movement. With how slopes work in 2.2, depending on the right circumstances, going into a new game mode next to them can cause the icon to clip through the slopes entirely. In Update 2.2, the toggle trigger is now able to show what objects are being toggled off in the editor. Problem is, however, the second this happens, it cannot be reverted back, and you have to leave the editor to get those objects back on the screen. Might not be a bug, but it sure as hell is a half-assed implementation of this. If you're playing around with sound effect triggers on Android and tab out and back in again, sounds they used to play no longer play, and you have to exit the editor to get them back. If you move around in the editor and press the playtest button at the same time, you become unable to do anything in the editor unless you exit. When you rotate a skewed object using the rotate buttons 45/90 degrees, but the warp menu isn't open, the skewing that was done to the object previously resets. If a collision block is rotated in negative decimal rotations, it is currently impossible for the game to load that information correctly once you have saved and exited the editor. It will instead increment itself by 0.01 decimals. On specific iOS devices, combining the bulge and pinch screen effect results in the game not demonstrating the shaders properly. If the game modes Ship, UFO, Wave, and Swingcopter are in free mode and upside down, they will all die if they hit the ground. Horizontally skewed solids will display their hitboxes incorrectly in the editor until saving and exiting playing the level. If you select mini mode, reverse gameplay, mirror mode, and rotate gameplay in the level settings, the cube will jump back and into the ground when pressing an input. If you try to change both the base and detail color of this specific saw object, the outline will become separated from the rest of the saw. If you stretch a collision block really wide and rotate it at a decimal between 90.1 and 91, the hitbox for the collision block stays at the center instead of the entire block. Both negative and positive rotational values affected in this way. If you go through a background change trigger with preview mode disabled in the editor, it will enable preview mode background color while still having everything else unchanged. Static camera don't work on game mode portals as they will move accordingly in the editor, but in-game it will not move at all. If you have a static camera enabled with the follow option toggled on an object, trying to use exit static with another trigger will work at first, but when entering a game mode portal the camera position will revert back to what the static camera follow was following previously. When having the camera moving vertically with an offset trigger, game mode portals adjust the camera independently, and since the game mode portals here have different Y positions, that difference gets added onto the ball portal when the player goes through, which shoots the camera upwards. Having objects locked onto the player using a move triggers' lock to player feature does not work properly, as depending on the level's gameplay, it will gradually go off center from the player. If you save and load your in-game account whilst having favorite lists attached to it, going back to viewing those lists will result in some levels straight up disappearing and be displayed by a different level that doesn't exist. You need to reload the page in order for the actual level to reappear again. If you have selected a hard level difficulty and go to the awarded tab, newly rated hard demons will show up too. They disappear eventually, but they shouldn't be in here to begin with. This one is a little confusing, but if you have a saved level with ID 0 and with user ID 0, simply by having the level in the saved tab will result in your comments on your profile to turn yellow. While the footage shown here is done through external softwares, there have been reports of this happening in the vanilla version of the game as well, hence why the bug is considered official. If any shader is used in the level, the blending effect on blocks will be removed by the shaders when applied to one layer. You're not supposed to be able to search for lists with multiple difficulty filters, but if you select the difficulty first and then switch to searching lists, they still stay selected, though you'll only find lists with the easy difficulty. In the UFO game mode, clicking and holding while going on to a forward-facing slope will cause the UFO to be stuck to the slope. You fall off of it when releasing, and if you keep holding, it will fall off at a seemingly random time. The UFO's vertical speed has no speed cap, allowing for the speed of the UFO to get really fast. Might not be a bug this one, but just for safety I'll list it here. Oddly enough, the cube's jump height changes depending on the speed of the icon. The highest jump height is achieved with 2 times speed, and the lowest jump height is achieved with 0.5 times speed. When jumping and then landing at a place above where you started the jump, you get moved forwards 1 length unit, which is 1/30th of a block. This makes sync inconsistent if the number of jumps that you have to do is also not consistent. There are many iterations of this bug which all lead to the same outcome, being that it destroys the sync ever so slightly. Certain half-slab objects are smaller than half a block. Technically not a bug, but it is inconsistent game design. One of the very thick line blocks is slightly larger than a block. This is a visual bug considering the hitbox is still a normal block, but the sprites are sticking out. This thick line block has an incorrect hitbox attached to it, as the hitbox presented is more like a half slab object. The hitboxes of these objects are displaced from the sprite and are also entirely the wrong shape, being rectangles rather than triangles. Under the right circumstances, the swipe option in the editor can break and become unusable. Turning it off and on will not fix it. You have to exit the editor and reset the scene. Copy and pasting teleport portals will result in the newly created orange teleport portals not being selected. It moves along with the blue portal if you move it around, sure, but not vertically. If you select two objects, open the scale menu, move the objects and then scale them, the center of their scale will be as if they hadn't moved. This is because the center of their movement is assigned when you open the scale menu, but it is not refreshed when you move them with the scale menu still open. User coins don't turn green when selected, unlike most other objects in the game. The main colored section of the toggle trigger is always at full opacity, regardless of which layer you are on. Certain types of saws are displayed incorrectly in the custom delete filter. When in a bordered game mode in playtest mode, pausing and zooming out will move the borders. The text in the menu for the area scale trigger says area transform trigger instead of the actual name. While not having preview mode on, the background will have its real color after teleporting in playtest mode. The build helper button also uses group IDs for calculating new collision block IDs, despite being entirely separate. This corner object has a small pixel gap separating them from the white lines of the slope objects, meaning it is too tiny. Technically not a bug, more of a nitpick, but the 1.6 spikes seen here in this image have their hitboxes slightly taller compared to any other spike of this kind, demonstrating inconsistency in game design. When scaling up many of the game's buzzsaw objects to the highest scale, 2, it will reveal small gaps in various locations on each of the sprites. If you have show hitboxes on and rotate an object, the hitboxes do not update on the object until hitbox view is refreshed by either moving the object or disable and re-enable the show hitbox setting. Having an object at an angle that's a multiple of 45 degrees, but not a multiple of 90 degrees, and then rotating it 45 degrees, will have the displayed hitbox become a square for some reason. If you don't have preview mode on, having a toggle trigger toggle an object off, and then deleting the trigger, the object will not show up again unless you press the in-editor pause button or going into playtest mode. Many of the in-game triggers allows you to direct them to a negative group ID, which the game won't let you do anything with it anyway, rendering it completely useless. When selecting multiple toggle orbs and going into the edit special menu, the menu will include touch trigger and spawn trigger options, despite not being applicable for an orb. The free mode option is available for cube and robot portals, despite being literally useless for those game modes. They're already in free mode at all times. The menu for free mode can only be accessed when selecting a single portal, even though any game mode portals share identical priorities aside from the game mode. The L on the gold font has a few missing pixels on its outline. It is currently impossible to place objects between both layers of a portal, which would help with the illusion of entering the portal like you do with any game mode. The white outline on the level complete menu has gaps in it on the corners. If you enter dual mode, have a trigger enabling ghost icon trail and then go through a single portal. The trail effect on the icon that disappears will continue to generate in the last place the icon that got removed was. The ghost icon trail will not show on any game mode that has a cube shown as well, such as the ship, jetpack, and UFO. It instead shows the cube for the ghost icon trail, but uses the full sprite as origin anyway, leading to the effect not working as intended. The wave trail is a generated path that works as a guideline for where the icon has previously traveled, and in most cases does function as intended. However, the trail is not generated properly when falling off blocks or having a dash orb stopped by an S block, resulting in the wave trail being inaccurate in showing where the wave icon had gone in some cases. If you have switch wave trail color enabled, if player color 2 is black, it will result in the wave trail color not switching to the correct colors. When a wave icon is hidden and then shown, it will generate reddish particles like the ships. As the UFO, holding and landing on any platform will continuously generate jump particles below the player. Having an airborne practice checkpoint that you have jumped to get to and restarting will result in having slide particles appear under the player when restarting as if you had fallen off a block. When entering a dual mode portal with the ghost icon trail enabled, the second icon in the duel will not have the trail effect. Using another icon ghost trail trigger during the duel will fix this problem. The ghost trail is slightly misaligned with the robot. When the completed and or uncompleted filters are on, An invisible star rated filter will also activate even if you ask for it or not. Going to your saved songs and then deleting a song will not reload your saved songs, resulting in there being the same number of songs that you deleted fewer on that page. This means that the entire page will be empty if you delete 10 songs without changing to a different page. Off-screen song interfaces will not render. This is normal, however deleting a song will, despite moving songs up, not change which songs are allowed to be rendered, making some songs still not render despite being supposed to be on screen. They will only show up again if you begin to scroll through the page. Custom songs of the game can be used as main menu tracks, but the game's main level songs cannot. The menu loop does not perfectly loop, as there is a very small hiccup right at the end when it tries to start over. When searching up a Leaderboard banned account, the displayed icon will be the same as when they had just gotten banned. In specific cases, names that have no explicit implication can't be searched, such as the username Uranus. If you think this is not a bug, you can search Uranus perfectly fine, which has way more potential for different implications if you ask me. Pressing escape while on the title screen will open the quit game menu, and pressing escape there will exit that menu. You can however do both with one press of the escape button, so holding the button down results in an almost epilepsy-inducing effect of the quit game menu opening and closing repeatedly. If you hold the dash orb and enter an S block while also touching an orb and dashing, the click done for the dash orb carries over to this orb. While this could be a cool gimmick, this violates one of the core mechanics of the game, that you need to click again to use an orb after jumping or using an orb. You cannot upload an empty level, which is good, but you can get around this by updating a level to be empty, bypassing the limit altogether. The circle particle effect that shows when entering a game mode portal have inconsistent color choices depending on which game mode. The dual portals and ball portal has the correctly assigned colors, but ship, UFO, wave, robot, spider, and swingcopter have a different color compared to their portal's color. Cube portal meanwhile has no effect like that at all. Landing on a block while dashing will result in ground particles showing up along with the dasher particles, meaning the game thinks that you have landed on the ground despite being airborne. If you go to your created lists, click on the name field to rename it, open and play a level in the list and enter practice mode, you won't be able to place checkpoints down. This happens because the game keeps writing into the text box, putting priority of your inputs. It is sadly unclear how this is recreated, but the font objects in the editor can get confused and mix with one another when one of the objects are deleted. Trying to use difficulty filters for the awarded lists tab doesn't work and will display the default awarded tab every time. If a teleport portal does not have the instant camera placement, enabling the smooth ease option on that teleport portal results in the camera not reaching its position in time and clipping into place. If you activate an options trigger that disables inputs for player 2, being in single mode at any point afterwards will stop the effect. Orange teleport portal data isn't stored properly, and setting it to any layer aside from the default, then saving and exiting, will result in the portal getting its layering reset to 0 again. Same thing can be said about its scale not being remembered either, which has affected older levels such as Amorphia by H-Hyper. Under specific circumstances, copy and pasting a group of objects will result in not being able to use free move on the new group of objects. When pasting multiple quarter-tile pixel blocks, there's a small chance that they will change horizontal position by a very small amount. Geometry Dash supposedly does not have keyboard support on Android devices, meaning that it is impossible to play platform levels on Chromebook. While it could be argued that this isn't a bug, selling a product where a massive key component of the game is missing is a huge problem. Apparently pressing Option plus E on Mac will cause the entire game to crash. When in editor and scrolling through the level, some objects may disappear even when preview mode is off. They reappear once you exit the editor and enter it again. This is supposed to be an optimization technique which just ends up causing more problems than it solves. If you decide to stay on the event level page for too long, it can result in an IP ban, since the server keeps telling the client to check for a new event level every 10 seconds. This causes the game to flag you as a bot, and you have a pretty good chance of getting IP banned. If a level song has fade in and fade out effects enabled, the practice music will be affected by this too. By buffering pause and going into practice mode in a copyable, it will cause the level song to play normally rather than the practice loop. It won't reset when you die either. If you repeat the following steps, it will be possible to assign the same group to an object twice. This bug will have been performed correctly by selecting a single object, yet its assigned group is not highlighted. If you've set the in-game resolution to something smaller than your monitor's resolution, Going into full screen mode after that whilst switching tabs and opening shortcuts to the game will make the game keep the resolution despite it trying to cover the entire screen. It is unknown exactly what triggers this to happen, but the end result is the game looking very low in quality, despite being in high graphic quality as demonstrated here. Force blocks appear to behave differently depending on where the player starts, leading to some inconsistent outcomes. Since RobTop servers don't handle leap years properly, every leap year shifts the ago timestamps by a day. This is why you could see 11 years on first level as early as August 10th, 2024. The game and the level came out on the 13th of August 2013, and according to the game now, this level came out 3 days before the game came out. When using dynamic mode with aim or follow options on a target group ID without a group ID parent and a center group ID that is either 0 or made up of multiple objects, the target objects will spin rapidly. If center group ID contains multiple objects and no group ID parent, it will spin even faster. Scale trigger will not work if scale is either 0 or 1. Gradient triggers without any references use the edges of the screen as reference instead. These edges are initialized when the level loads, but if the camera trigger is placed before, the origin camera rotation isn't taken into account. Pressing the F3 preview mode hotkey while editor playtesting will result in the game forgetting to keep track of where objects were. If you press play again, it will treat the object as if it were when you originally paused the playtest. Group parent IDs cannot be applied to an object with 10 existing groups, even if the object has that group already. If you press the copy values button, it temporarily creates an object in the editor that for some reason can be selected if you know where to find it. If you delete this object, the game crashes. If you're in the editor of a level and you press the preview mode hotkey, it will result in certain sprite elements still thinking the camera is stuck whilst everything is moving as normal. A reversed animated object will not activate with the animate trigger. If a level with a too long level name has both a copy and a high object count symbol and is placed in a list, the high object count symbol will be layered on top of the get it button. There appears to be some kind of bug where the game sometimes doesn't remember the exact rating of a level, which in the case of Galacticus here, has a legendary rating but is presented as simply featured here in a list. The list has to be loaded again for this to be fixed. The game in certain circumstances will not properly calculate the exact percentage of where the progress bar says you are. The percentage of the progress bar versus the new best percentage are different in these cases seen here. In Update 2.2, the game has become unable to read out the account names that only have one character. If you compare it to the 2.1 update, this is something you used to be able to do just fine, but in 2.2 that has now become a dash. If you have an unfinished quest available locally on your account but then load a cloud save that has it finished but not claimed, it will result in the game presenting quests as completed but will not be possible to claim. You have to collect any of the stats in question in order for this to be fixed. If you are in the quest page and are waiting for the new quest to show up, if you are in the menu when the timer runs out, nothing happens. You have to leave the menu and then come back. If you open a daily chest at the exact moment it becomes available, it won't open. When browsing through rated levels that are also present in your saved levels folder, if a level has been updated, there's a chance the game will incorrectly display the get it button as opposed to the update button. If a rated level of yours gets deleted or moved to another account, the creator points you would have had before that point stay on the account anyway. The only way that changes is if you get another rated level. If you warp a slope-based structure that uses detail objects and copy-paste it, the solid objects will flip into pasted copy. Sometimes if you place a 1.6 slab object, it can flip vertically when re-entering the editor. These three objects are confirmed to have this problem. If you pause while playtesting and you rotate a pad, it rotates differently than without playtesting. With playtesting paused, it rotates within its own hitbox, and without it, rotates within the grid. If the rotation value of an object is negative and then save and exit the level, going back in the editor will show the object's rotation has rounded to the nearest 2 decimal point, which is normal, but repeating the save and exit process will increase the rotational value by 0.01 over and over again until it reaches the nearest negative value. If you continuously copy-paste an object while slightly warping it every time, it will slowly get more skewed. While in playtest mode, if you select 2 or more objects and try to snap them to grid with free move on, it won't work properly. When trying to input certain lines of characters like ... or ... iOS tends to combine these together into one symbol. which Geometry Dash can't render in its own font type. Thus, when you type the last character of the sequence, it'll erase the entire sequence. This can theoretically happen on Android as well, as it supports a similar system of separate symbols for other languages that the font type is incompatible with. Upside down game modes can still clip into the ground. If you use a teleport portal to teleport under the ground, you will stay underground as long as you actively hit orbs. If you finished a practice mode run on a level with breakable blocks, hitting retry instead of exiting the level will result in the breakable blocks becoming impossible to break in specific circumstances. Blocks that would normally kill you causes a similar effect, where they become bonkable. In certain circumstances, hitting orbs next to specifically placed slopes allows you to clip through them. Entering a dual transition at the completion of a level will result in a second icon infinitely floating at that transition. When playing the challenge, going back to the vault afterwards will result in the main menu loop playing instead of the vault song. If you get a new record or rewards on a level, hit retry and die before the rewards are collected. The next attempt restart speed will be almost instant. On levels uploaded before 2.2, mirror portals can result in the percentage to go slightly backwards. If you go into the uncompleted level tab, beat a level and refresh, the number of uncompleted levels will not update correctly. Refreshing search results doesn't refresh the count in general unless you re-enter the tab. If you fall onto an orb and hit it as opposed to jumping into it, the trail doesn't disappear and remains there until you jump. Breakable blocks do not save properly during a practice run, as they reappear if you die, even if you manage to break them before you die. A normal sized wave icon cannot die from these obstacles while gliding on the ground, but a mini version of the wave can. While it could be argued that this is just a deliberate hitbox choice, the fact that an icon is physically unable to die from obstacles on the ground is a legitimate game design flaw. If you die with auto retry off, press the retry button before the menu appears, the level will run with a retry menu screen stuck on the screen. Dying again won't get rid of it, but it will have two of the retry screens present. If you go into practice mode and place a checkpoint down right at the very beginning of the level, continue hitting retry and the sound effect for entering the level will continue to play over and over. If you hold down on a dash orb as the cube, go through a robot portal and then let go of the dash orb, your cube will visually be smaller. If you hold down a dash orb through a big cluster of cube portals, the rotation of the cube icon will be stuck in midair. This will vary depending on the cluster of portals present. Even with the updated slopes in 2.2, the player can clip between two slopes that are one block apart. Shake triggers deactivate if you die during one in practice mode. And on the same clip, in a camera-bound in game mode and with the shake trigger active, only the bottom ground shakes whereas the top is still. If you're gliding on slopes with D-blocks on them as wave and you place a checkpoint down on them, the wave will start dying on the slopes despite the D-blocks that are supposed to prevent that. The player icon will continue to either fly or hold jump with no inputs after going from a two-player duel to a single icon part. Dying at 53% or 59% on a demon level rewards you with one more or one less orb. The end level barrier doesn't hinder the icon being affected by other objects, which can result in some really extreme icon behaviors. When a cube jumps on blocks that rise vertically, any other icon in the level gets exactly 1.0 taken away from their X position on the frame the player jumped. Sometimes the cube also goes forwards instead of backwards, but there's no consistency to this. Placing a gravity portal in half blocks in this manner allows the ship to clip through the half blocks in which would otherwise be impossible. If confirm exit is enabled in the game options, if you press the play button in the pause menu and the escape button at the same time, you will have the confirm exit menu stuck on the screen while playing. Some icons in the game have cases of where they do not display properly, and while in some cases they are picky, the ones demonstrated here are clear cases where they are not displayed as intended. Changing a level's font while the text box is selected still allows you to interact with the text, but without it changing to green. When rotating an object in the editor with ground enabled, the rotate interface will be layered behind the ground. When selecting a counter trigger, trying to delete that specific object with a custom button displays it as a dark green trigger with the text counter above it, as opposed to the number we see here. Objects with a blending color still have lower priority in layering than objects that don't have blending color, resulting in objects that should be layered in front being layered behind. By arranging 22.5 degree slopes that they are stacked together with D-blocks, a mini version of the wave game mode will clip up them really quickly. 45 degree slopes will kill the wave instead. Stacking a bunch of slabs in this specific way allows the cube to clip on top of them without any input. Having an object locked onto the cube or robot and then make specific jumps that requires the icon to be held back up on a platform, the object will not acknowledge this movement change and have the object be misaligned. When placing a text object in a level, removing the text object, change the default font of the level and press undo to get the text object back, the text object will give you a bugged font. Placing a slope underneath a slope in this manner will cause a UFO to bounce each time without any player input. It is impossible to scale an object to the size of 0.98, 0.99, 1.07, and 1.02. Much like with scale not having access to those decimal numbers, the same problem persists with the opacity values of colors. Black slopes only have their object color turn black if they are on screen. If they are off screen and color slowly changes, they will not appear on screen. If you've played a level with a different font than the default one the game provided, if you go and create a brand new level, the default font will be changed to the one the uploaded level you just played had. If you have multiple objects in the same position group in the spawn particle trigger, the particle spawns in either object or both, regardless if the object is toggled on or off. Depending on the level, some unrated levels appear in the star filter despite having no stars attached to them. If you start downloading a song on a level with multiple songs or sound effects before the level download finishes, the audio counter won't update properly and only one song will download. Trying to change the layering of game mode portals is impossible, as it will stay as it is presented at all times. An object cannot have layer 0 as a secondary layer. The game registers it as non-existent. If you place new objects down and select them all whilst being in the all layers presented, you will be able to press Go to Layer despite the button itself not being highlighted. Selecting more than one object will automatically enable the Edit Special button, but with some objects it does not do anything, rendering it useless. Ticking the box Allow Multi-Activate on any object that has the setting available will not remember the setting when trying to create an exact replica of that same object. If two or more objects share the same L2 layer but use different L1 layers, the EL setting for object data will present itself as -10,001. If a touch trigger is set up in the following manner, one of the three input methods, left mouse, up arrow, or spacebar, is disabled. Dual mode is supposed to disable player 2's inputs, but if there's no second player, disabling the input method seems pointless. Normally, a speed trigger cannot be moved on the X-axis, but this can be bypassed if you're using a rotate trigger and a different center target. Given, however, there are rated levels that use this as a feature, it is probably best to fix this as a legacy option if this is deemed worth fixing. When logging into a different account and re-log into yours, there's a pretty good chance that those two save files have merged together, resulting in the Creator tab being filled with levels from both save files. If you attempt to search for a username that is not the exact name, you will not get any results at all or get some other account presented that usually isn't relevant to your search. In earlier updates, the game had no problem presenting every name relevant to your name search, so I don't see how this is supposed to be ideal. In parental controls, the button Only Allow Featured Levels will hide the level search button as intended. But if you go into an account's comments section, you can completely bypass that and find specific IDs of potentially unrated levels you wouldn't have access to. Much like in Update 2.1, using hardware by AMD will result in multiple graphical oddities and glitches, such as the screen going black until interacting with another menu element, or the loading screen having a rather significant graphical glitch going across the screen. When loading your account with an empty cloud save, everything will come back as intended except for what icons you previously used. If you try to load the save file a second time, the icons then appear as they should. When logging into your account, you are free to log in using any form of capitalization to your name as you please, and when logged in, the game will demonstrate your name exactly as you wrote it. Once you update some pages, the way the name is actually saved to the servers will display instead. If you message someone with the max character amount in the title, if the recipient tries to message you back, the title will be extended with RE:, and bypass the character limit. When already having the maximum number of any type of shard, there are some cases where you can get more than the maximum amount. In the case of this image, this user gained 110 shadow shards by already having 100 and then completing the Path of Shadow in Paths of Power, which the game proceeded to force them to get another 10 for some reason. When using the Recent tab, it is possible to find the same level listed more than once when reloading the page. Having two levels named the same name in the Creation tab, the game will label the second level with rev.n to indicate that it is a duplicate. However, removing the identical name from the first level with this name will not remove the duplicate name tag. If you select a demon rating, clear the search filters and press the demon rating you had previously selected, the game will demonstrate the wrong demon difficulties. Minor graphical inconsistency here, but if you press the demon rating button of a demon level and rate the difficulty, the button does change to an unusable one, but with the icon inside the button suddenly turning smaller. There are currently a few levels uploaded that are impossible to play or copy online, due to the level info itself being completely blank. The current theory as to why this happens is that the level was at some point attempted to be deleted, but the page for downloading the level remains somehow. By using multiple devices to play the game on, it is possible to bypass the maximum number of 100 followed users. By following 100 accounts on one device, go on a separate second device with the same save file, but without the follower count updated, follow some more users there and then save on the second device. If done right, you will have bypassed the game's follower cap. Based on the number of level copies created in a row, pressing escape the same number of times will repeat the same page over and over again. I am aware that it is technically doing exactly what it is supposed to be doing, but it just creates an unnecessary result. Some accounts are impossible to load. This bug likely stems from the fact that they were never logged into after being registered. In the editor and in Ignore Damage, placing a platform and moving it up in this manner under the player while spikes surround the player, the elevation from the platform is delayed until the spikes are no longer on top of the player. This also happens in-game if you have Ignore Damage enabled too. When beating some rated levels, there's a small chance that it will count the level as completed but not remember any of the other level play information, such as attempts or jumps. The cause of this is unknown. For unknown reasons on specific mobile devices, when dying in a level, the game will forget that it needs to remove the icon that died, as well as the game itself getting completely stuck in place upon death. The game becomes unable to automatically restart on its own, and the game can't exit the level, so you're forced to close the entire game. A follow-up bug related to the game getting stuck in place is also that icon effects, as well as the icons themselves, don't get removed when they should be removed, and instead stays in the level as if they have become decoration. The more attempts you spend, the worser this gets. If you've downloaded a level with a level name that is literally just blank, when closing and opening the game twice, the level's name will randomly change to unknown. If you've set the global color for an ID to blending black, playing in the editor will reveal that any trigger affecting that set color ID will be forgotten if a start position is placed after it. If the start position is placed before it, the game will remember to change the color properly. Copying objects that are supposed to be toggled off will be toggled on until the pause menu is opened. When playtesting a level, spawn loops can break if you have placed a start position slightly further ahead of where it is supposed to start. A theory as to why this occurs is when using a really fast spawn loop, using start position or pausing/unpausing messes with the in-game ticks, causing them to skip over the spawn loop delays and breaks. In specific cases, the game might confuse which icon that actually dies and spawn the death effect on the wrong icon. If a wave icon collides with a slope and a blue pad at just the right position, there's a pretty good chance that the wave trail will stay on screen even when dying to the slope. Using the regroup button merges group IDs with block IDs for some reason. When entering a dual exit portal, the second icon set to disappear has its glow disappear before the icon itself does. When going through the different leaderboards and clicked on any of the leaderboards as soon as the first one you clicked on finished loading, the leaderboard you most recently pressed will have its button disabled, and you cannot enter that leaderboard until you exit out of the leaderboard menu. If you change the glow color of your icons to specifically this color, checking your profile will suddenly reveal your icon glow to be white. If you search for levels with a specific song that is mostly unused, there's a small chance of scrolling through pages of random number of levels on each page. Levels that have received updates from using a main level song to a custom song will still let the servers keep track of the level as if it is still using the main level song, resulting in search results being incorrect. In the saved levels folder, the hearted levels button is flipped, where if it is enabled with the green checkmark, it will act as if it is disabled. If you then try to disable the button, only hearted levels will show instead. If this is an intentional choice, then it is just convoluted and stupid. If you add a deleted level to an empty list and try to upload it, the game will tell you that uploading the list failed. Yet if you check your account, you now have a list with 0 levels in it. Orbs acquired from chests are not added to the final count of the statistics page until you close the game. If you're on a friends page and have just unfriended somebody, the friends page begins to work strangely, as you can now interact with both a user's page and scroll through your friend's page all at the same time, resulting in weirdness. If you open any profile and any other comments that leads to a level page, pressing escape to exit out of these menus will make both the comments page and profile page close simultaneously. If you have a weekly demon, daily level, or event level, attempt to skip it and close the skip level interface at the same time, there's a chance that the level you just skipped stays on screen. If you leave the page entirely and go back in, the next level of the specific page shows up. If you use a game controller while in the editor, entering the pause menu and moving around the joysticks, the editor is possible to move around even if the pause menu is meant to prevent that. Many of the shader triggers will react very intensely depending on what values you set them to, which may be argued to not be a bug at all, but in some cases their purpose completely falls apart when you do, and break what they're supposed to be doing. If you have a count X and Y friend request each other, have one of them accept the request and the other keep the profile open and revoke the request, you can send another friend request while having that account friended. If you load a deleted level from your saved levels list where the creator changed his name, load the profile and their uploaded level list, go back to the deleted level and load its comments, trying to update the level crashes the game. If you've set the music offset in the options menu to a value lower than -40, the game gets confused with restarting a song when dying, instead of continuing on from where the song stopped upon death. If you've put down a teleport portal in the editor, deselect all objects you were building with and select the orange portal. Enabling the swipe option allows you to place down orange teleport portals without a blue portal attached to it. These objects cannot be deleted, and the only way to get rid of them is if you leave the editor and come back. A very universal problem with the mobile version of GD is that you are in many instances able to hold two inputs at the same time, and have both actions occur simultaneously if you let go of the two inputs. This can also in some instances crash the game, which is a problem that needs to be resolved. When pausing in the editor while playing with the ship game mode, if you hold the ship input whilst pausing and then let go, unpausing will have the ship hold the input on its own without any player input. When playing on mobile and hold the pause button down and keep holding it until the level completion screen shows up, the pause button will remain big until you press it again. If you scroll up and hold a scroll page such as the saved levels folder, tapping anywhere else on the screen to bring up a second interface and the scrolled interface will remain locked in place, causing a small graphical bug. When mobile players try typing number combinations such as 8234575 and 4253, they will be censored and deleted. If you're wondering what those two numbers are apparently meant to spell, it's breasts and arse. While it is an incredibly far-fetched censor, the fact that PC users are not restricted to this is probably a bug. If you place a color trigger before the start line of a level, they will not account for the delay of the first attempt and make its color changes before the level even begins. A move trigger reveals what is actually supposed to happen. There are a few instances in the game currently that show off the wrong difficulty versus the number of stars it has. The reason for this happening is that these levels has had their difficulty ratings switch from demon and back to non-demon, resulting in the game getting confused with which difficulty to display, since it is trying to pick from the difficulty table for demons as opposed to non-demons. If you have the final key for the dungeon keeper, pressing the keyhole to unlock the cage and pressing the escape key at the same time will cause a softlock, as you will never be able to access the demon gauntlet from this point forward. If you get a user coin in a rated level, by pressing retry and attempt to collect the same coin again, it will appear as if you haven't collected the coin in the animation. Placing a teleport portal in a ship part above the limits of the game mode will allow the ship to clip out of bounds if you have placed blocks underneath the exit portal. The spider sprite has a seemingly random chance of its sprites misaligning during its running animation, causing a weird little texture glitch. If you place a teleport portal very high up and place a game mode portal with boundaries next to it, the end wall is not displayed where it should, as it is still where the blue teleport portal was located. Shake triggers in the editor do not play unless they are spawn triggered. Whether that is intentional or not is unknown, but the inconsistency falls under the bug label. If you pause the game mid-jump whilst holding the input, the game would normally realize you've let go of the button. But in dual mode, one of the icons will act as if you're still holding the button down. If you time the button input for enabling practice mode and hitting the escape key just right, the main menu of the game will play the practice mode song instead. Hitting a dash roll with the ship will have the ship's trail disappear entirely. There is no update button available for a daily or weekly level, meaning that if a level set as daily/weekly gets an update, it is impossible to get that update if you've already downloaded the level as a daily/weekly. If you set up a teleport trigger towards an object but have an extra object with the same group ID that trigger teleports to, it will cause the game to change where the music line appears. But considering that in this example, it is entirely random whether it appears from the beginning of the level or where your camera is located, it doesn't appear to be working as intended. If you open the leaderboard tab after completing a level, press an account's profile page, enter their levels and exit back out, the end level pop-up becomes unclickable. The game is essentially trying to make the cube jump, which doesn't do anything at this point, and so the interface is completely ignored. If you start as a dual wave in a level and enter a cube portal, the dual will become centered with the upper portal. This does not happen if you enter a dual portal in a level normally, and will only happen if the level starts as a dual. Some users will find it literally impossible to open chests in the game. This is likely caused by the game for unknown reasons failing to keep track of how many chests the user has actually opened, resulting in a weird number spike. The variable keeping track of how many chests a user has opened is a 16-bit integer, which means if the game thinks you have opened 65,535 chests, the game is unable to open anymore. The attempt ticker on the item edit trigger doesn't work properly unless you set the item ID to anything but 0. As it will just be a constant value of 1 otherwise. If you've enabled target mode for a move trigger with X or Y only setting enabled, enabling dynamic mode as well causes the coordinate options to be ignored completely. If you spawn a move trigger with a silent option from inside a collision trigger that moves 2 or more collision with at least one of them dynamic, the game will sometimes crash. Small epilepsy warning on the upcoming clip here. Particle objects, depending on the settings, can get bugged and end up with very erratic movement and rotation. Advanced follow movement breaks when using rotation on targets part of linked objects or groups. If a color trigger is stopped with a stop trigger before the color change is finished, if you touch a checkpoint after these two triggers have been activated and respawn from that checkpoint, the game will forget the stop trigger happened and the color change will resume still. Stop trigger has no effect and cannot stop what an edit area trigger is doing. Spawn particle will not spawn particles in-game if the target of where the particles are to come from is off-screen. This is not the case in the editor as it keeps spawning particles even off-screen. An extension to the previous bug too is how the spawn position of particles is dependent on the last rendered frame instead of the current position. While this is common behavior in games, this only occurs in-game and not in the editor, leading to some inconsistent behavior. There is a long list of IDs that will not be affected when trying to give build helper or regroup to help out with replacing them. While this is not a bug specifically, it is inconsistent game design. A couple of such oversights are listed here. Another inconsistent design element is how certain triggers that contain a target ID value do not display their number on top of that said trigger. A couple of such oversights are listed here. Minor graphical error here, where if you press edit object on the counter trigger, you will find a paste button that is not layered where it should be. If you copy an object and the respective triggers that it comes with, if one of the groups has a parent ID, using build helper will not follow and will be removed from the object. If you open the graphics settings menu in the main menu, the last icon that attempted to travel across the screen will be the only icon that continues to travel through. There's an explicit check in the game's code where if the graphics menu is open, it will skip generating a new icon. Its colors will still change oddly enough, but that's it. Keyframes copied to another level will not display the connecting lines until reloading the editor. Setting up a rotation trigger that uses a center group ID that belongs to 0 or multiple objects and none of them having a group parent ID, the target objects will just spin in place as opposed to rotate around the center. For 0 objects that makes perfect sense since no center exists, but when there's more than one center object, you can easily calculate the origin point by checking the distance between the center objects. In the editor options, the disable paste state groups option affects both the paste state button and the paste button from the edit groups menu, meaning that the option is lying to you. Using the ignore time warp option in the timer trigger will not work, as the timer will still slow down or speed up by time warp with the option enabled. If you pause the game whilst an area fade trigger is in effect, unpausing the game will reveal the trigger not working for the first frame that the game plays after unpausing. If you've disabled preview mode and go to change the level's background, the game will forget to continue displaying it in preview mode, and will instead show it in color. The spawn order of different spawn triggers does not always follow a set pattern, as some spawn triggers can only spawn in a certain order, and will wait for other triggers of its kind to spawn, delaying them for an arbitrary amount of time. The 2013 to 2014 versions of enter triggers cannot be spawned with the spawn trigger option. You can, however, with touch trigger, so this is definitely unintentional. Objects that have been stretched leading to an extended collision of that object is aligned to you, and even though the game displays the hitbox being fully covered, game modes can still clip through in many spots. Much like how a stop trigger cannot stop an edit area, trying to override it with another edit area doesn't work either, completely ignoring its existence. Using enter trigger effects on portals and other objects composed of multiple objects only affects specific layers of the portal objects. If a level has skewed objects on screen and the player enters a mirror portal, the skewed objects that are on screen during this transition will lose its skewed scaling, whereas other objects that weren't on screen at the time would keep it. If you've set a color ID to use the player color, if you open the color menu after closing it, there's an option to change the player color. Changing it does nothing, and if you change the menu pages, the option immediately disappears. If you pause the game while holding a player input and release it whilst in the pause menu, the input release will not trigger even if you unpause. The scale trigger doesn't allow you to scale an object down to 0 in any scale. 0.001 works perfectly fine, but not exactly 0, which is definitely an oversight. When the game plays through a level, the song of the level very gradually falls behind as it progresses, leading to parts in the later halves of the level having their sync changed ever so slightly, which if you're using the music to help you play certain parts, this bug is outright maddening. I've heard rumors that this one isn't a bug you considered necessary to fix, RobTop, but I'm speaking on behalf of everybody with a sense of rhythm. Please fix this for fuck's sakes! If you completed a classic level and press retry afterwards, objects that have been locked to the X position of the camera will be in the wrong position next attempt. In my case, the objects even straight up disappeared. If both accounts involved send friend requests to each other, it accepts the request automatically and it is possible to bypass the friend limit of 400. When you copy a player color in the editor, dark colors will often be slightly lighter than they're supposed to be. If you're quick enough, you can skip the game's terms of service pop-up and begin playing without accepting them, but you'll have to deal with this menu every time you go back to the menu. If you have a controller connected to the game and you go around in the menus, some screens will have the icons for inputs overlapped over others, which needs to be addressed. These thick outline blocks are not arranged accordingly and the extending line object is too wide. While the 2.2 update added a few more counters to the profile stats, the collectible moons is not listed anywhere. The achievement name for obtaining 15 ice shards and the achievement for reaching Path of Ice rank 2 is exactly the same, which is a small oversight. If you spam press on the door of the tower, it will spam the open door sound depending how many times you press. These 3D slope objects are completely broken in all graphic settings, instead demonstrated as broken pieces instead of a slope. When unlocking the supporter icon, the icon also stays visually locked until you refresh the icon page. When playing in the editor, under specific circumstances with the spider orbs in a duel, the game will briefly forget what boundaries the duel have set and will for a split moment glitch out and later pop back in place. Setting up an advanced follow trigger with no easing will normally behave as intended, but if a time warp trigger is involved, the object will suddenly have an easing motion when the object is about to reach its destination. Using mode 3 of the advanced follow trigger, there are two features in that trigger that seemingly does nothing, which is slow dist and slow accel, where no matter what values they are given, nothing changes to the following object. In the edit advanced follow trigger, the option redirect direction also does nothing to change much with what this trigger can do. If the value of position Y mod is equal to 0 when exiting the editor, it will automatically copy the value of position X mod. On the advanced follow trigger, for the max range value there is an option to label it with an ID. This ID generally does nothing at all from the tests I've done. The two triggers area fade and area tint have an option named DEAP, which appears to do absolutely nothing when enabling them. If there are multiple advanced follow triggers active handling a target object, the game will fail to account for the movement the object had prior, and duplicate the movement it is supposed to have as the movement is mistakenly applied again for every trigger. Minor graphical error here, but the UI and link visible triggers have an effect line indicating when the player passes these triggers. But since these triggers will load immediately upon the level starting, they're completely useless. If you set an object's base color, or detail color if base doesn't exist, to color ID 1012, this will automatically assign the lighter color option. The game, however, will freeze or crash when trying to render this object during the level. If you have the quick restart option enabled from the game settings, enter a level and repeatedly press R, in a normal level everything will behave as normal. In platformer mode, however, any spawn trigger set to activate at the beginning of the level will be skipped. When you're in the editor toggling off or unloading a particle object, it will disable and clear all particle effects that came from that object. But in-game, these particles are not cleared and become separate from the object, and no changes made to the particle object will affect these disconnected particles. The more this occurs within a level, it will eventually cause severe lag. The first particle in the particle loop will fail to spawn if the particle limit has been hit already. If an advanced follow trigger is stopped, then spawned again before the next advanced follow movement, it will not activate again as it should. This is listed as a bug as it is the only trigger in the game that suffers from such a problem. The maximum rotation speed of the advanced trigger doesn't scale with the time warp trigger. Edit area tint and edit area fade do not get paused when pausing the editor playtest. Keyframes have a hidden unique ID which is used to determine what keyframe objects are connected. The ID is kept even when copying to another level, which results in the copied keyframes combining with existing ones. The parent's position is static when using a parent ID inside the animate keyframe trigger, which results in bugged movement when scaling or rotating the keyframe. On mobile devices, if you press left while already pressing right and vice versa, releasing right after this will not trigger a right release or left release event. This affects both player events. Pausing a move trigger stops the movement of objects, but objects without a hitbox are stopped on the next visual frame instead of the next tick. This causes objects without a hitbox to offset from the position of objects with one. If you resume this move trigger, the offset is undone and everything is back to normal. Flipping a teleport trigger by scaling with a negative value does not change the direction force that it will be applied towards. Flipping the trigger with the editor tool does change the force direction. If you select a folder in your saved levels, then check your favorited list and go back into saved levels. The game will forget which folder you were in. If you then exit the saved levels menu and come back in, your folder will be selected again. Geometry Dash pretends as if target item ID in the item edit trigger are also group IDs when using next free in edit group, which is so fucking stupid. When a particle object is emitting, changing it from grouped to relative will cause the rotation and direction of these sprites to both misalign and go in wrong directions. In platformer mode, if you have objects with hitboxes all affected by area triggers, place a start position down on top of those objects and use any game mode except Spider to watch it continuously bounce on its own forever. Move in any direction to fix it. Keyframe scaling is relative to the group parent ID's rotation, which is not reflected in the preview where it is relative to the keyframe's rotation. When using X or Y only on an advanced follow trigger with mode 3, the target is unable to steer if mode 1 or 2 is present on another advanced follow trigger set on the opposite axis. The position of objects and their rotations get offset if rotations are slow, roughly 30 degrees per second. All rotation transformations are affected except area rotate. Timers spawn from the oldest timer first to newest last on Android, and from newest first to oldest last on Steam. When using the ease out option on multiple area triggers, it cannot manage more than one kind of easing at a time, leading to the game picking and choosing only one of the ease out options as opposed to mixing them. The random variables in edit advanced follow are always picked in a range between 0 and a given value, unlike other random settings like the ones seen here. This is listed since the game appears to indicate with an icon that setting a negative speed should be possible. Even if an advanced follow target loses all velocity by leaving the max range of the effect, if the player clips into the target's hitbox, it will boost the player. This behavior continues until the trigger is stopped. Toggle disables area effects on the object only in some cases for certain proximities and if the length is negative. This should be replaced by a dedicated ignore disabled feature, as there is no logic or indication to this behavior. If an object stops being visible, area scale, rotate or move will stop applying in certain situations. Flickering is caused when a target goes off screen and ends up back on screen when the effect is undone every other tick. Objects with the hitbox that stop being visible once brought off screen do not render properly if brought back instantly on screen. Area tint ignores the base or detail color setting of single color objects. Scaling or rotating an object by a large amount makes it impossible to undo the transformation if done inside the editor. This makes all affected objects get their scale and rotation be completely different when stopping playtesting after the bug. In the same clip, we see another bug in display too. Area effects stack up for every calculation when starting from a start position. All area effects are influenced by start position in the case of area scale and area move, which can crash the game. When a solid object is scaled by a negative value, hitboxes become very thin and buggy. Spikes and other non-solid hitboxes are not affected. Attempts item is not updated on new attempts and always returns value 1 when used inside item edit or item compare. You can exit out of a main level before it starts, and it will result in the game hiding your mouse cursor and killing your menu music, which will both come back again once you play another level. Particles with long lifespan are not properly cleared when the level restarts if the particle object is using the quick start option. A particle with the uniform color option that is spawned will use the color channel value at the time of spawning instead of syncing with a color channel continuously. If you spawn remap group ID 2 to any ID, then call another spawn which remaps group ID 2 to any other non-zero ID, then call a trigger which uses group ID 2, the game will instantly crash when calling the first spawn. Only Steam version and Android devices are affected by this. iOS doesn't deal with this problem. Multiplying large numbers using pickup triggers has significant errors, as the maths don't add up properly at all, indicated by the random 16 showing up for some reason. A simple oversight when creating a new level is when you change the game type of the level from classic to platformer. The game will indicate this in the level's menu. But if you exit without saving this change, the level will still display as a platformer, yet when you play, it is a classic level. When in platformer mode, if you jump into a set of jump pads that enter a jetpack or UFO game mode, the cube icon will fail to minimize and will continue to be displayed as a big icon. If you simply walk into the pads as opposed to jumping on them, the game will minimize the cube properly. If you attempt to scroll through the main levels on your mobile device and keep them in place where two level menus can be seen at once, you can press the both of them simultaneously, and the game gets severely confused trying to merge the two levels together. In this case, it played the level dash with the finger dash song, followed by the game crashing. Area triggers give you the option of using different kinds of movement interactions, these two being radial movements. The settings for modback and modfront are used in other interactions to increase the intensity of these effects, but for the radial interactions, modback and modfront do nothing and yet are still displayed. The channel ID of a pulse trigger cannot be remapped to a new value using paste color. Rotating a slope object does not update its orientation in the editor unless you move the object or quit the editor. When you toggle the option Animate Active Only for a particle object, that option for all particle objects will be deselected when the level is saved. If you place a teleport trigger to start at the very beginning of the level, any game mode will be immediately teleported back to the start as opposed to where the teleport trigger wants it to go. If you placed object locked onto the player's X position and use multiple teleport triggers to teleport between them, this severely extends the length of the level despite the teleport objects being directly above the player at all times. This can be fixed if you enable Ignore X for all teleport triggers. When using the speed settings for both an advanced trigger and edit advanced trigger, start speed and speed do not multiply each other's speed settings as stated in RobTop's own verified editor documentation. The documentation claims that the speed option of Edit Advanced Trigger should function like a multiplier, copying the movement speed of the object and doubling it. And yet it does not do that at all. The values stored inside count triggers can be updated improperly or not at all when paused and resumed, and there are 4 bugs of its kind related to this issue, which I will rally each of them at a time, starting with the count trigger desyncing if it is paused and then resumed. Next iteration is the count desyncing if the player is respawning from a checkpoint. Next one is the count desyncing if it spawns the same item that it targets. And finally, the count order after being interrupted is reversed if the new item change is negative. A level with a start position that has had motion blur shaders before the start position object, the level will spawn in the shaders from the start position as if the triggers are trying to sync with the level. The rotate trigger aim mode is very inconsistent and will offset its rotation 180 degrees. This can be fixed by giving the target group ID a parent group, but nonetheless this is still an issue. Groups spawned by a remap checkpoint do not inherit remaps, leading to incorrect behavior. There are multiple triggers in the game that cannot be remapped or have some IDs that are not remappable, which cause issues and make things more difficult. Those are the following triggers. The BG speed trigger appears to carry influence on the event line of triggers, where they are causing event lines of other triggers to straight up disappear even if there aren't many triggers on screen. The spider game mode has the ability to clip through blocks using the black orb with the following setup. Whilst the game does support orbs to have custom rotation, the option to do so is not available unless you also select a buzzsaw object as well. Trying to do it with just an orb object is impossible. It is currently impossible to remap the group IDs for gradients. The target position IDs of checkpoints cannot be remapped either. And lastly, the respawn ID is also not remappable. Through unknown reasons, the game on a mobile device may have a glitched menu loop, causing this weird cutting effect on the main menu song. Entering a new menu or a level where new music is played will fix this problem. Once more, through unknown reasons and seemingly depending on the level, the music playing in the level might just stop for seemingly no reason at all. There's no consistency to this, it just randomly happens. When fully zoomed out in the game's level editor, the game attempts to optimize the grid squares, presumably to make the game run smoother. However, by seeing that the grids are still intact at the bottom of the screen, but everything else in the center only has vertical lines, it would appear the optimization efforts are focusing on the wrong axis and should remove the y-axis lines as opposed to the x-axis ones. When bypassing the zoom trigger limits, by using the fade option elastic in, and the trigger duration set to anything but 0, with a spawn loop the camera can be zoomed out past a limit of 0.4. While I love that we can zoom out past 0.4 since that hard cap is cancer, it is sadly a bug and I must list it as such. If you have an edit song trigger in a level, playtest a level and without stopping the playtest you save and exit, the menu song inherits what the edit song trigger did inside the level, which can cause very funny outcomes. By tabbing out of the game and reopening it, there's a chance textures become misaligned and placed on top of other sprites, like this info button layered on top of the user comment button. Some rated levels are seemingly unlisted from the rated filter altogether. Through unknown reasons and only on specific levels, the particles that come out from a flying ship can fail to play as intended, demonstrated by particle pieces becoming stuck in its movement before disappearing altogether. And finally, if you pause a sound test in the middle of the trigger and then playtest, the song retains the edit song config when you start the playtest. Hey there, you still here? I'll be surprised if you are. You deserve a cookie and you can proudly state that in the comments. This video was just as tedious to produce like the original Bugs video I made 4 years ago, and this one was just an even more extreme version of that. But yeah, there are over 500 bugs in this damn update, which is outright ridiculous considering update 2.2 has at least 7 patches so far at this point. Unless RobTop hires me to work on the game, I am never doing a video like this again. If these 2 bug videos are an inclination of what's to come with future updates, I'm not interested in documenting bug amounts reaching the thousands. What I can say right now though is this. RobTop, you need to stop making updates this big because you're creating a bigger and bigger uphill struggle with each one. Fun fact, around 150 of the bugs here are from the 2.1 bugs video I did back in January 2021. So you did not fix all of the ones I showcased to you. And while your moderators do everything they can to fix what they can find, that doesn't suddenly mean they're qualified to represent a quality assessment role. So genuinely, if you truly care about the state of the game being playable, study this video and fix what you see fit and actually cover everything this time. Employ some people that fully know how to playtest video games and have studies and degrees that can back up that fact. In the meantime, for the rest of you, my deepest thank you for watching this video if you actually stuck through it all. This one is a lot to digest and I do apologize for that, but thank you for watching this video. See you all next time.